समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
This begins with a spoiler alert. If you promise not to go to the end of what I am saying right now or to go to the description and read the postscript of the column, please don't do that. If you promise not to do that, then I will tell you that in this column I play a trick on you. After ages, India has a chief who speaks the hard truth. Air Chief Marshal A.P. Singh has persistently and firmly drawn attention to Indian Air Force's alarming numbers and technology gaps with its rivals. He even held up the mirror to the holiest of the holy among our PSU monopolies, HAL, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, in fact, within the earshot of cameras and microphones. This is refreshing when you're used to hearing from a succession of chiefs self-pitying platitudes like we will fight with whatever we have. The reaction to the air chief breaking the silence barrier, pun intended, the reaction to air chief breaking the silence barrier is predictable. Anybody pointing to what the armed forces are short of is instinctively accused of being import hungry, sold out. The insinuation is an evil cabal prevents India from developing weapons and makes it dependent on expensive of unaffordable imports. Imports don't take place, and that's why armed forces are always short. Defense has also become an influencer pursuit, and even the chiefs are wary of them. Then Donald Trump throws the F-35 fat into this fire. F-35 lena hai ki nahi lena hai? This all-pervasive fear makes defense purchases nearly impossible. Too little is made in India yet, and even if it is, most of it is in tight joint ventures with so much of IPR with the original manufacturer. Much as we boast about rising levels of indigenization, in fact, I need to figure out sometime why don't we say Indian? Why do we say indigenization instead? Nevertheless, ask yourself this. After making 200 plus Sukhoi 30 MKIs and God knows how many Jaguars or even MiGs, variants of MiGs, can we make one entirely by ourselves even now? We won't reverse engineer like those cheapskate Chinese, hai na? You see, all of this was why we had called 36, we as in I, this columnist, had called 36 Rafales a gutsy purchase which broke a stalemate and defied the vicious lobbying, leak versus leak battles in New Delhi. But we also acknowledged the validity of the counter-argument. How did India paint itself into such a corner? The result was a $5 billion or $6 billion purchase off the shelf in a wartime-like haste. That tag, top arms importer, is the greatest self-inflicted damage and a curse on the Indian system. You are the biggest arms importer. How can it go on? Billions and billions are being spent every year to import arms. Let's look at some facts. Stockholm-based SIPRI, the global think tank, which estimates imports or global arms trade in terms of constant $90, puts the value of India's total arms imports in 10 years, that is 2015 to 24, at a little over 23.7 billion, which is 9.8% of global arms imports. The average is a mere 2.3 billion per year. In fact, if you wanted to more granular detail, the highest amount of imports was in the year 2021. That urgency, came in because the Chinese came calling in Eastern Ladakh. That was about $3.96 billion. And the lowest was 2023, just about $1.43 billion. So it's that little. 2 points arise from this. First, that Narendra Modi's decision to order the Rafales, Apaches, helicopters, M777 mountain howitzers, Harpoon missiles, MH-60 Romeo naval helicopters, MQ-9B, drones, etc., all off the shelf, were wise and brave, like a senior doctor risking a series of immediate surgeries to save a deteriorating patient. The second is a question. How does the fourth largest military machine in the world and one with two live borders, China and Pakistan, manage to keep itself in the ICU forever, often needing emergency surgery in the middle of the night over a weekend? Or, to make it inconvenient for this columnist, you could reword the same question. Mr. Editor or Mr. Columnist, go get your head examined. How can you accuse a country importing most armaments in the world of suffering from a fear of acquisitions? How can it then be perpetually short of critical weaponry? You can't be highest importing and yet be perpetually short. How do you square this? These are perfectly valid questions and reflect the multiple paradoxes of India's defense planning, deserving a couple of tomes. My favorite is Arming Without Aiming, jointly written by the late Stephen P. Cohen and Sunil Dasgupta, who worked with me in India Today about 3 decades ago, learning to cover defense. He's now an academic. The book bemoans the lack of a culture of strategic thinking and planning in India. The Indian doctrine, the authors say, is purely tactical, episodic, immediate, need-based. My own most telling insight on this sits in my rather flimsy personal archives. It's a note scribbled with a pencil on a scrap of paper from Jaswant Singh. He slipped it to me with a smile at a strategic affairs brainstorming at Schloss Leopoldskron in Salzburg in the summer of 1994, 31 years ago. As General Sundarji, at that point, who was also participating, held forth on the weaknesses in India's strategic doctrine. What did that scribble say? And I quote, I headed the parliamentary committee to examine India's military strategic doctrine, wrote Jaswant Singh. We concluded there was no strategy and no doctrine. This is zero evidence yet that this has changed, because if it had, we would not be buying frontline fighters off the shelf as if picking groceries at a supermarket or toys at Hamleys. Or spike anti-tank missiles, a few hundred at a time, infantry rifles in batches of 60,000 or thereabouts. This has been the history of our defense purchases, except, say, a remarkable 1985-89 phase under Rajiv Gandhi. But this left behind the Bofors virus. Bofors, there was also the Type 209 submarines. Fear leads to fatal minimalism. How was a MiG-21 Bison shoved into a wolf pack of F-16s after Balakot? Remember the initial setbacks the IAF suffered in Kargil when 2 MiGs and a Mi-17 helicopter were lost and all crew were killed except one, Nachiketa, taken prisoner of war. A fourth, a sturdy photo reconnaissance Canberra, which has since that type has retired long time back, that was nursed back to base by a deft crew with a crippled engine. All 4 were hit by shoulder-fired missiles. The IAF was still going in the old style, low attacks and taking risks. Once IAF woke up, they bought overnight laser kits from Israel for its night flying high-altitude Mirages. The picture changed because high-altitude Mirages at night were not exposed to shoulder-fired missiles. This isn't meant to be a litany of our chalta hai or ho jayega short-termism. It is to explore a limited question with apologies to Erica Jong. Remember her fear of flying? So this comes with apologies to Erica Jong. Why this fear of buying? Since 1987, one reason is the Bofors syndrome. Every defense purchase is fraught, delayed or thrown in orbit. The description George Fernandez preferred for sending a file into permanent spiral of indecision. In fact, he used and immortalized this expression in a walk the talk that we recorded on Siachen Glacier. This makes New Delhi the easiest playground for arms dealers, middlemen, and a newer phenomenon, the dedicated B2B, business to business or buyer to buyer, a B2B arms bazaar media. The public is confused between negotiations, shifting requirements, a constant whiff of worry that the system is owned by this evil arms trade. At the same time, we import more than any other nation. You want a paradox? A.K. Antony, our most risk-averse, most anti-American defense minister since 1991, ended up buying more from the US through government-to-government purchases than India has done in its entire history. And these included C-130s, C-17s, and PA-TIEs for the Navy. Modi resumed that de-risked emergency buying tradition, though with more urgency. The only way to fight phobias is to face them. It is fashionable to curse Rajiv or Bofors and more, but the truth is 1985-89 was the only period in our history when weapons acquisitions were proactive, futuristic, and redefined our largely defensive tactical doctrines. General Sundarji's brass tacks and checkerboard exercises fought, quote unquote, fought the wars in enemy territory, in fact, deep inside enemy territory. Even today, much of the hardware the three forces will field, God forbid if there is a war, it was bought by Rajiv, from Mirages to T-72 tanks to new series MiGs, BMP armored fighting vehicles, and of course Bofors artillery. Because I know many of you are defense nerds and will point this out, I will also underline the fact that Mirages were ordered by his mother, by Indira Gandhi, but only began arriving in Rajiv's years from 1985 onwards. In those years, our defense budget crossed that Lakshman Rekha of 4% of GDP. To understand how self-defeating this phobia is, check some data. Our 10 years defense imports are less than half of our gold imports in any average year over the last 10 years. And more tellingly, less than 5% of the import bill of Reliance Industries and 8% of the import bill of Indian Oil Corporation, a PSU. So defense imports, highest in the world, are actually very small. Our annual average military imports at $2.3 billion is less than one-fourth of our fertilizer imports every year. Why is buying for the Kisan less scandal prone or more virtuous than buying for the Jawan? Controversy dogs defense imports not because they are huge, but because they are small, piecemeal, with many vendors, and the system games this fear. If we don't conquer this phobia, we will keep landing up in the ICU over a weekend, needing emergency transfusion, if not surgery, soon enough. And now the postscript, which I had requested you or beseeched you not to read or not to watch the last part of this recording. So here is the postscript. And the postscript tells you the trick I played on you. Remember I said that in this column I'm playing a trick on you. So here is the trick I played on you. I had written a national interest on 27th April 2015, 10 years ago, in the wake of the Rafale controversy. This week, I have mostly written over the same text, changing the figures and updating the context. This shows the more things change or don't change, the more the joke is on the fourth largest military power in the world.